The problem of origin of life. Ordinarily, when thinkers want to relate the matter of life to God and divine will, they bring up the problem of origin of life on the earth and the question regarding the cause of the first emergence of life. Conclusive scientific evidence indicates that life had a definite beginning on the surface of the earth. That none of the various types of living creatures, including animals and plants, have always existed since eternity. This is because the earth itself has a limited age. Moreover, it was not in its estimated life of several million years always fit for life. We observe that each individual of a species is always born from another individual belonging to that species. Wheat comes from wheat, barley from barley, horse from horse, camel from camel, and man from man. It is not the practice of nature that an animal or plant, for instance, should come into existence from a mass of sheer dust. Always, the origin of a living creature is traceable to another living creature from which it separates in the form of a seed or sperm and grows in a suitable location. Now, how did life start in the beginning and through what means? Does every one of these innumerable species end in an individual living creature that is the source of its particular species? If that is the case, how did that first creature come into existence? For nature seems to disallow the emergence of a living creature without a seed, sperm or something that should have separated from a living creature. Hence, we must admit that an exception to the rule must have occurred. In other words, a miracle had occurred and the divine hand had emerged from the hidden to create that first living creature. Or is it possible that all these species have had a single source and root, and are members of a family of species? On the basis of this hypothesis, too, we confront the same problem, that is, even if we suppose all the species to have been derived from a single unicellular organism, the same question emerges as to how that first living creature came into existence. Isn't it the case that science has proved that a living creature cannot come into existence except from another living creature? Hence, was there an exception to the rule and a miracle, in that the will of God interfered to create instantaneously a living cell? It is here that the adherents of the materialist outlook are forced to put forward certain hypotheses which are incredible to themselves. The theists, on the contrary, consider it as an evidence for the existence of a creator and state that a supernatural power did interfere to create the first living creature, and that it was the will of God that led to its emergence. Such was the view of Darwin, who was personally a theist. After having solved the problem of the branching out of species for himself, he arrives at one or several living creatures who first emerged on the Earth's surface without having been reproduced by another living creature. He says regarding them, "As for these, they came to life through the divine breath." Chrissy Morrison, in the book The Secret of Man's Creation, says in this regard, "Some say that the corpuscles of life escaped from one of the planets and after wandering in the atmosphere for ages and consecutive centuries descended on the Earth's surface. Such a belief is not acceptable, because it is impossible that they should have survived the space's absolute cold, and even if, supposedly, they could survive that danger, the cosmic rays that are scattered in space would have destroyed them. Even if they could pass through this stage, they must have come down accidentally in a very favorable point such as oceanic depths, where several conditions existed simultaneously and a suitable environment was created for them. After all these problems, the question still arises about the origin of life and as to how it did emerge in other planets. Today it has been proved for certain that no environment however favorable and conducive to life can create it. Similarly, no kind of chemical synthesis or combination can create a life corpuscle. The problem of life still remains one of the unsolved problems of science. Some say that a minuscule particle of matter, of a microscopic size, coagulating with a large number of particles of atomic size, disturbed their equilibrium and assumed the form of life through their inclusion and exclusion. Nonetheless, no one has claimed until now that he has produced life with the means of chemical action and reaction. By this discussion Chrissy Morrison intends to prove that the hand of a creator is involved in the origin and beginning of life, because it cannot be explained by material or natural causes. Concerning the origins of man and the great metamorphosis that resulted in the emergence of an intelligent creature with an extraordinary capacity for discursive thought and a power that could create the sciences, he says, the emergence of man as an intelligent and thoughtful creature is too profound to be considered an effect of material changes in which a creator's hand was not involved. This was a sample of the mode of thought and argument of this group in relation to life and the divine will. There is no need to cite more or less similar statements of others that do not differ essentially from the passage quoted. As we know, till now man has not been able, despite all his efforts, to produce with scientific means the substance that makes up the living creatures. For instance, he has been unable to produce with chemical substances an artificial wheat grain possessing the properties of a living grain, which may grow into a plant when sown and develop ears, nor has he been able to produce artificially the sperm of an animal or man with the capacity to develop into an animal or man. Nevertheless, scientists have not ceased in their efforts, and as yet it has not become conclusively clear for them whether they would be able to do so in the future or if this matter lies beyond man's scientific and technical capacities. This topic too, which relates to the future has, like the problem of the origin of life, created a controversy throughout the world. Inevitably, that group of theists who, with their above-mentioned approach and logic, say that the creation of life is in the hands of God, are of the opinion that, in this question too, man's efforts in the field are bound to be fruitless, since man has no control over life, which is exclusively subject to the divine will. Man cannot create life any time at his will with the scientific and technical means at his disposal. The prophets who raised the dead were able to do so with the leave of God. It is not possible for anyone to perform such an act without the permission of God, and should anyone when to do such a thing with the leave of God, it would mean that such a man has joined the ranks of the prophets and performed a miracle, and, of course, God does not carry out a miracle except at the hands of his prophets and awliya. This group of theists consider man's present incapacity in this regard as the proof of their claim. When they observe that man has produced wheat grains that do not differ in any way in their chemical composition from natural wheat but are devoid of the characteristics of life, they point out that that is because life depends exclusively on the will of God and the creation of life requires God's permission, which he does not give to anyone except his apostles. We said that the Noble Qur'an explicitly affirms that life lies in the hands of God and that it negates the role of anyone else in the creation of life. However, the Qur'an never refers to the matter of the origin of the human species or the beginning of life in order to affirm this point. On the contrary, it points as evidence to the present empirical order and considers the current, ongoing system of life as the system of creation, becoming and development. But when it wishes to describe God's creatorhood in relation to life, it does not make recourse to the first day. In this respect, it makes no distinction between the first day and the subsequent days. Rather, it points to the present orderly changes of life as the changes of creation. For instance, in the blessed Surat al-Mu'min it states, "We created man of an extraction of clay, then we set him, a drop, in a receptacle secure, then we created of the drop a clot, then we created of the clot a tissue, then we created of the tissue bones, then we garmented the bones in flesh, thereafter we produced him as another creature." So blessed be God, the fairest of creators. This noble verse mentions the systematic transformation and changes that occur in the embryo and considers these developments as a developing series of creations. In the Surat Nu, it states, "What ails you, that you look not for majesty in God, seeing he created you by stages?" In the Surat Al-Zumar, it states, "He creates you in your mother's womb's creation after creation in threefold shadows." In the Surat Al-Baqarah, it is stated, "How do you disbelieve in God, seeing you were dead and he gave you life, then he shall make you dead, then he shall give you life, then unto him you shall be returned." In the Surat Al-Hajj, it states, "It is he who gave you life, then he shall make you dead, then he shall give you life." There are many verses on this theme and all of them consider the present current order as the system of creation, the splitting of the grain and the seed under the ground, the growth of plants and herbs, the greening of the trees in springtime. All of these are mentioned as part of the ever-new and perpetual divine creativity. In no place does the Quran consider the role of divine creativity and will in the creation of life as relating exclusively to the first man or the first living creature that emerged upon the earth's surface, or consider only that organism or grain as the creature of God and the product of the divine will. The Noble Qur'an also mentions the creation of Adam, but not for the purpose of affirming monotheism, or for the sake of the argument that since Adam was the first man, That proves that creation did occur and that God's hand emerged from its sleeve to create human life. God's hand has never been concealed within a sleeve. There is a strange point worthy of notice in this regard. The Quran makes use of the story of Adam to convey many teachings of a moral and educative character, such as man's capacity for attaining to the station of God's vicegerency, his abundant capacity for knowledge, the angel's humility in front of knowledge, man's capacity for attaining superiority over the angels, the harm of greed, the harms of pride, the effects of sin in causing man's decline from the most sublime of stations, the role of penitence in man's salvation and his return to the station of proximity to God, warnings against the danger of misleading satanic insinuations, and the like. But it never relates the special and exceptional situation of Adam in his creation to the subjects of Tawhid and theology, for the objective behind its mention of Adam's story was a moral and educative one. It was not intended as an evidence in favor of Tawhid. Moreover, it confines itself to mentioning Adam, and says nothing about how the life of the other animal species originated on the earth. We have mentioned earlier the customary approach of the theists who, when confronted with the absence of an explanation for the beginning of life in the first living creature, say, "It was the divine breath which brought it into existence." But the Quran considers the life of other human beings also to be the result of the divine breath, in the same way as it considers the life of Adam as being due to the divine breath. In one place the Quran relates God as saying to angels regarding Adam, "When I have shaped him, and breathed my spirit in him, fall you down, bowing before him." In another place it says, "We created you, then we shaped you, then we said to the angel, and bow yourselves to Adam." It is clear that, in this verse, creation, the blowing of the divine breath and the veneration of angels is ascribed to all human beings in general. The Quran states in the Surah Alif Lam Sajda, "Who has created all things well, and he originated the creation of man out of clay. Then he fashioned his progeny of an extraction of mean water, then he shaped it, and breathed his spirit in it, and he appointed for you hearing and sight, and heart. Little thanks you show." As pointed out by the exegetes and as indicated by the context itself, the pronoun in Sawahu relates to Sulallah, not to Alanzan.